extraordinary women lawyers from JurFem's that I will be introducing in a very short while. First of all, let me highlight the presence in this webinar of many friends, allies, and partners from the courts and legal community here in Canada. We are really pleased to have the president of the Quebec City Bar, Mrs. Elif Oral, with us today. The Quebec City Bar has been supporting this project of ours in Ukraine. We have representatives from the Bar of the province of Quebec with us today. Hello to all of you. We have friends, partners, allies, and colleagues from the government of Quebec and from the government of Canada. Thank you so much for your presence and support. And we have a lot of friends and colleagues from civil society organizations internationally and here in Canada and in Quebec. Hello to all of you and welcome to this webinar. We have some friends from Ukraine who are joining either directly through this Zoom broadcast, and another broadcast is being made also of this event. So hello to all of you. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all. So this webinar today is taking place as part of our International Women's Day programming at Lawyers Without Borders Canada. We would like to take this opportunity today to really let our colleagues and friends from JurFem's tell us about their commitment and their extraordinary work in the fight against sexual violence in Ukraine. This work of ours, this partnership between Lawyers Without Borders and JurFem's is made possible thanks to the support of the International Relations and Francophonie Department of the Government of Quebec. We've been working on this project for 6 months now, very actively for the past 6 months, and it's thanks to the Government of Quebec. So it is my great pleasure to pass on the microphone to Mr. Patrice Bachan, who is the Director of the Francophonie and International Solidarity Department of the Government of Quebec. Mr. Bachan, a few words from you, please.
Merci Pascal. Salutations à tous et à toutes. Very warm salutation from our Ukrainian friends. Cher Pascal, merci. C'est un honneur pour moi d'être ici aujourd'hui au nom de la ministre des Relations internationales, Madame Martine Biron, et d'écouter avec attention ce webinaire. It is an honor for me to attend this webinar today on behalf of the Minister of International Relations and La Francophonie, Martine Biron, who is also Minister responsible for the status of women. Yesterday, for the International Women's Day, I was at the opening of an exhibition at the National Assembly of Quebec, which highlights sexual abuse and violence against women in the context of clashes in North Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was very touched that these situations can still happen in our world in 2023. Today, we will listen very carefully about what happened in Ukraine. These awareness events are essential. Let me present you 3 colleagues who are with us today. Catherine Pouliot, political attaché to the Minister Martine Biron, Julie Gervais, and Marie-Josée Blais, 2 members of my team, my fantastic team. A year ago, Russia launched a brutal and unjustified aggression against Ukraine and its people. On behalf of the government of Quebec, I would like to express to the Ukrainians and also to the Ukrainian community of Quebec all our solidarity. Over the past year, the Quebec government has taken actions in support of the Ukrainian people. A total of 19 million Canadian dollars were granted. One of the actions was to support international cooperation organizations to carry out humanitarian projects with local populations and displaced persons in neighboring countries. I am pleased to have the opportunity today to learn more about the excellent work carried out by Avocats Sans Frontières and its partner, the Ukrainian Women Lawyers Association, JurFem's. I salute the courage of these dedicated women who work hard to bring support to survivors of sexual violence. We hope that this conflict will end as soon as possible so that Ukraine and its people can once again live in peace and regain their freedom. J'exprime à nouveau toute notre solidarité et notre appui à l'égard des actions du Québec, de Québec sans frontières et de ses partenaires. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you so much, Patrice, for these kind words, and thank you once again for your support and that of your team. So it is really a great pleasure and an honor for me. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to introduce you to three formidable women from our colleague and partner organization, JurFem's. We have with us today, first of all, Khrystyna Kit, who is a lawyer and one of the initiators and co-founders of the Ukrainian Women Lawyers Association, JurFem's. Khrystyna has a PhD in law and has been working for more than 10 years now in the field of women's rights advocacy. We have also with us Kateryna Shunevych, who is a lawyer, a member of JurFem's board, since 2019, and is the head of the Analytical Center JurFem's, which is the think tank that conducts research on the adherence to the principles of gender equality and non-discrimination. Kateryna also acts as an assistant and PhD student of the Law Faculty Department of Criminal Procedure and Forensics in Ivan Franko National University of Lviv. And we have also with us Marta Pavlyshyn, who is a lawyer and a specialist at the JurFem's Education Center, a department of JurFem's that develops trainings and educational products in the sphere of gender equality, women's rights, and non-discrimination for women lawyers. So really, I am humbled and thrilled and pleased to welcome the three of you and ask you one of the first questions I think that we all have in mind here. How are you in the real sense of the question? How do you do? Are you safe? Are your loved ones safe and sound? Khrystyna, maybe you can start.
Greetings. Good evening and good day, depending on your time zone. Indeed, the question, how are you doing, is one of the first questions that every one of us are hearing starting from the 24th of February of the previous year. And usually we are asked these questions right after the greeting. So thank you for asking us. Right now, today we are safe. Our team is safe because we work and we live in the city of Lviv in the western Ukraine. Despite of the fact that we had missile strikes in Lviv region, and unfortunately 4 or 5 people have died. But this is how we have been living for more than a year. We have learned how to stay safe, that we need to stay in the shelters, in the bomb shelters, and care for our lives and lives of our families. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm happy to greet everybody. Thank you for this invitation and for the opportunity to join this event and to tell about what we have been doing for this half a year. I'm safe, and fortunately, I'm safe, and I'm very happy that despite of all the obstacles, despite of airstrikes that we had today, nothing is interrupting this live broadcast we have the opportunity to be connected to the event in spite of any circumstances, in spite of the night shelling, night strikes. We can continue our work, and together we are stronger. This is what I can say. Thank you. I would like to join my colleagues. I would like to express the gratitude to the Canadian people and professional community for supporting us during the war in Ukraine. Also, I would like to say that the issue of safety is really there. We have adapted, but safety is very relative in Ukraine. And this is not a new question. Since February 2022, we have a full-scale invasion, but the war started back in 2014, and the crimes that we will be discussing today, they still continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again to the three of you for taking the time to speak with us today. I am sure that all the persons in the audience are joining me in saluting and expressing our admiration for your commitment and your work. So let me first ask you maybe about what is the work that your organization JurFem is doing on the ground, and maybe also at the same time to tell us a bit about what is the situation, how you see it, given the mandate of your organization. So what is the picture today and the scale of sexual violence in the context of this conflict? And I will address this first question to Kateryna, but we've agreed to Khrystyna, I'm sorry, and we've agreed that I will generally ask my questions generally, and either of our three invitees will be taking on my question. So the first question may be addressed to you, Khrystyna, about the work that you are doing and what's the picture of what's happening now in Ukraine.
Thank you, Pascal. In fact, the Association of Women Lawyers Ukraine, JurFem, starting from the full-scale war, starting from February 2022, we have been actively focusing our attention on working with the survivors of the conflict-related sexual violence. We started uniting around us the legal community. We have started engaging legal experts and lawyers who were ready to get trainings and to provide legal aid to the survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. We are working in several areas. First of all, it's important to mention that our organization, and my colleague is going to speak about it today, that we have a very powerful analytical center, and its task is to help our government, to help the legal community in the context of development of legislation. We help improve the practices in investigating the war crimes of sexual violence related to the conflict. So we have been working in this direction for more than a year. We have been doing very powerful work in partnership with the Ukrainian government. The government is open and ready to cooperate with the civil society organizations, human rights organizations, and this is an important area of our work. Another point, which is very important for us, I think that colleagues who did not study international law and who did not work in the sphere of international law, well, they will understand us when in February 2022 we understood we have completed the legal school, but we did not understand how to investigate war crimes on the international level. We did not understand international criminal law. And so we started reading everything anew, like first-year students. We started reading international documents, international treaties. We started studying international legislation from scratch. This was a very big challenge for us because we have graduated the law schools and we are experts in law. We are lawyers, but we are not international lawyers. So, of course, this was a big challenge for us and for many of our colleagues. So our education center is working a lot in this direction. We do not only create educational products for our legal community, but we also create products for our experts, for law enforcement agencies, for public officials who also need to get some experience in investigating crimes related to sexual violence, and provision of help to survivors to the conflict-related sexual violence. So in this regard, we cooperate with international experts, and among you, there are colleagues who have provided us with several seminars and with several trainings. Besides that, another important point is that the war speeded up a lot of processes. For example, we planned to do some things in a year or 2 or 3 years, but we managed to complete those things in half a year after the full-scale invasion. We started the work of our hotline of legal help for those people who have survived sexual violence and conflict-related sexual violence. Before the war, we were not providing help to the survivors, but starting from April of previous year, as a response to the events in Ukraine, and taking into account that there are a lot of people who need help, so we have launched a hotline of legal aid, and we have more than 30 lawyers who provide legal services to the survivors of sexual violence, including sexual violence related to the war. And as of today, right now, this is a continuous systematic work that we are doing together with our partners, with Lawyers Without Borders, and we cooperate in this regard and we support each other. If we talk about the scale of sexual violence related to the war, the colleagues who are present here today, who watch us on Facebook or on other channels, they can say that we have official statistics, but the official statistics does not depict the real scale of the war crimes, because a lot of survivors as of today still reside on the temporarily occupied territories. And we are going to find out about those facts after deoccupation of the territories. A lot of survivors today are still not ready to speak out, to work with lawyers or law enforcement agencies, because they need psychological, medical, or other kinds of help. And legal aid is not the first thing that they need right now. According to the official data, on the previous week, in the previous weekend in Lviv, we had a very big legal forum participated by international expert. It is entitled United for Justice. And during the forum, which is called the Legal Rammstein, also on the international level. So on the forum, the last figure was 171 facts of sexual violence related to conflict, which was registered by the Office of the Prosecutor General. So the survivors are women, men, and children. But as our government and we all understand that this is not the full scale of the facts that we were able to identify officially. So we continue to work in this regard, and this is a challenge for us, because today we need to build a system of justice. We need to build a system of provision of help and holistic services, comprehensive services to the survivors, so that those survivors would come to us for help, that they would be ready to testify. They should know that we keep to the principles of confidentiality and observing the rights of survivors. So our task right now is to create mechanisms of efficient response and help. So when the survivors are ready, they can come up for help, and they would be able to receive the high-quality help and on the necessary level. So this is generally about the situation that we have today.
Thank you so much, Khrystyna. So Interesting. Huh? So a crash course at the very beginning, because you had to get familiar to many new notions applying to this conflict, realizing on the way that the needs of the victims, of the survivors are multiple. They're not only legal, and thinking also about new ways to ensure the justice to be done. So the conflict is not the same today than it was on the first day of the invasion, as you were telling us. It is changing. So how have you adapted at JurFem to the changing nature of the conflict and the changing nature maybe also of the gender-based violence that is suffered in the context of the conflict? Are there any specific stories also you want to share about how this work is being conducted on the ground?
Good day, everybody. I will start. I represent the analytical center of JurFem that we have mentioned today. A few words about our division. Before the full-scale war, we were actively researching the problems of protection of rights of men and women in Ukraine. We were identifying concerns and problems, and together with the government agencies, we were suggesting relevant changes to the legislation. Another direction of our work that we continue today is a gender expertise of draft laws. So we checked draft laws from different members of parliament, whether they correspond to the rights, take into account the rights of men and women in their clauses. And we were conducting different research. For example, during the COVID, we were researching how COVID is impacting the access to justice for people. So after the full-scale invasion, we needed to refocus our work. Though we were researching the question of sexual violence related to conflict before, starting from 2014 up until 2022, the conflict was not a full-scale invasion, but after it started in 2022, one of the directions that we started to work on was the definition of conflict-related sexual violence, the forms of CRSV. We are not only preparing the research, we also work together with the Office of Prosecutor General, and we are trying to support them, to provide them some guidance on how to identify those crimes and how to conduct investigations. Because right now, a lot of law enforcement agencies believe that only rape is a CRSV. However, we have a lot of other examples, like forced nudity or forcing people to watch other people committing sexual violence. So right now, this is a challenge of identifying those crimes and bringing people to responsibility. Another point is confidentiality of the survivors and helping them to get back to their usual lives. So we have started the very important work in developing the legislation in the sphere of reparations, because for Ukraine, as a country that has never experienced a full-scale conflicts before, and we don't have a legal framework regarding in terms of reparations, who can be considered as a survivor, where the funds can be taken. So this is a very big issue, and it requires participation of international and national community, because analysis of cases and comparing the cases, unfortunately, in Ukraine, we don't have enough work on that. Another challenge in our work today, and maybe it is also an advantage and also a need where we need some expert support. So Khrystyna has mentioned that we have a hotline of supporting people who have survived sexual violence, and each case is individual, and we have to pay attention to that. And as maybe my colleague Marta will be able to describe our educational area of work. Thank you, Kateryna. If we speak about education and training area of work, I can say that in the late February, the full-scale invasion started. this was a few months after the strategic session of JurFem, and that we had a lot of plans, including plans on education and training. And after the full-scale invasion, it occurred to us that, and so whether it would be relevant to do all the work that we had planned earlier, and maybe that we should change our format of work. So for us, of course, we had to adapt, and the context around us, it governed our work that we were doing after that. And one of the first training products that we launched is that we conducted a webinar on the 6th of March. About 2 weeks after the full-scale invasion, we already had a live stream on Facebook, and we were talking about the Russia's war crimes together with our colleague Hayane. And there was a question whether it's relevant or not, whether people are going to watch our live stream, because we were like learning to swim again. For us, we were very pleased, and it was very important for us to understand that people need to have this dialogue. People need to understand that we have some things to work on. So the situation around is changing, and this is what we have to work with. We have to deal with it. And we were very pleased, and this inspired us for future work and for our development, and it informed our future products related to training and education. In spite of the full-scale invasion and in spite of all the challenges, when we had a new strategic session, when we looked back at our work, yes, we understand that we have not implemented some things, we have changed focus, but we have implemented something new, some things that we didn't even think about. During the war, we conducted a very big offline event, Academy of Lawyers, and we were trying to prepare a new generation of women lawyers who would be able to work with the survivors of gender-based violence and the survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. We need to understand this gender-sensitive optics and use the gender-sensitive approach. So, in spite of the full-scale invasion, we have a lot of achievements during this year, and we are proud of them. And I know that you felt our challenges as well, because one of our main events was just stopped when all the Ukrainian team had to have to leave, because this was one of the first massive attacks on Ukraine. When we have power outages, people have lost connection, people had no electricity, and we are very grateful to you for that you were able to continue the training and you did not stop. Another question is finding relevant experts, because some of the topics are new for us and we are not very good at everything. And having plans, plan A, plan B, plan C, what if we have a power outage, what if we have airstrike alert, and elementary some issues, whether people can get connected to us, what is the best time to connect, what we can do if they are not able to stay during the event until the end, how to do the recordings. So this was another challenge for us. But we understand the importance of our work, and we understand that it's important not to always adapt to the circumstances, but sometimes we adapt the circumstances to our tasks that we set for ourselves. Also, I would like to say that we have another plan B. We have it, and a lot of civil society organizations have it, is the victory. What are we going to do if we have an event and the victory is announced? So we have a plan for that as well.
Planning for option A, option B, and other options. I'm so pleased, Marta, that you told us a bit about that story, which is a true story. So we were having a training session together, and you basically had to run to the shelters because the bombs were falling on you. So you said thank you because we were able to resume, but for us it was like we couldn't believe that you came back a few hours after that and wanted to continue the work, which is for us another evidence of resilience, of Ukrainian resilience and your resilience. So thank you so much. I would like us maybe to continue more on the questions of challenges and successes, Marta, that you touched a bit upon, and it may be the three of you maybe telling a bit more about that, because some of the questions we have when we talk here in Quebec, people are asking, but how can they go on doing their work when it's a war-torn country? The bombs are falling, and the nature and the level and the number of atrocities that we're talking about, the nature of the crimes, and we know that unfortunately, once again, women find themselves amongst the first victims, including with sexual violence. So could you please tell us a bit more about some of the challenges you've already told us about, but are there any other challenges with respect to getting access to the victims, to the survivors, dealing with justice in times of war? And if you can tell us about some of the advances, some of the successes, some of the inspiring stories that motivate you to continue the work, we would be really pleased to hear about these.
Звичайно, відповідаючи на ваше питання про виклики і труднощі.
Of course, as for answering to your question about challenges and difficulties that we have, of course, we have a lot of them, but how we can accumulate our efforts and continue to work. On the one hand, the answer is simple and difficult at the same time. This is our country. These are the people that we live with every day. And it's important for us to be here and now and to do what we can, taking into account our knowledge and efforts and experience. As Marta has mentioned, when the full-scale invasion started, we were afraid that maybe people will not think that our webinars are important. Maybe it will not be a relevant question for them to unite around survivors of sexual violence, but our colleagues were looking every day where they can be useful, where they can help other people with their knowledge and experience. And for some people, it was like a breath of fresh air to understand that we are not alone, that we can unite and do things together. Of course, this is difficult. But by uniting efforts together with all the Ukrainian men and women, this is how we are able to implement our ideas and projects that we have. And this is how we can do our work and overcome the challenges. So, of course, we have a lot of challenges, and we have been mentioning some of them. The first one is, of course, whether the justice system is ready, whether the lawyers are ready, law enforcement agencies, judges, whether they are ready to investigate the crimes related to sexual violence, to provide help to the survivors of sexual violence, and bring perpetrators to responsibility. So in this part, as I have already mentioned, we are very proud of our cooperation with the Office of the Prosecutor General and with the international experts, because our organization is coordinating a working group at the Office of the Prosecutor General. We have united different experts, including the colleagues from Lawyers Without Borders who participate in our expert group, and together we develop different recommendations, for example, changes to the legislation. We develop guidelines for our investigators and prosecutors on how to identify sexual violence related to the conflict and different forms of sexual violence. We prepare methodological recommendations. We are trying to respond to the challenges that we have in our law enforcement system and to help our government to respond. Another big challenge that we have is ensuring justice for those who survived sexual violence related to the conflict. And for survivors, of course, every survivor has their own understanding of what justice is. For somebody, it is important to stay safe and to understand that Russia will be punished. Maybe it's not so important for them to go to the law enforcement and start interaction with the law enforcement agencies. And for others, it's important to bring responsibility a specific criminal who committed the crimes. For some survivors, it is important to bring the leadership of Russia to the responsibility for the crimes of aggression, for the crimes of genocide and crimes against humanity that they are committing right now against Ukraine and against its citizens. So in this part, for us, I would say, not only as for the legal community, but also for the international community, for the system of international law, this is a challenge. How we will be able to ensure justice and how we will be able, together with you, how we will be able to ensure the form of reparation, like a guarantee that this crime is not going to be repeated in the future by any other state. In order to ensure this, we need to work together to collect the evidence, to document relevant facts. We need to work together, among other things, on the system of improvement of international law. We need to create a special tribunal to investigate the aggression crimes in Ukraine. So this is a question. So we need to communicate these questions together with you. We need to advocate for creation of this special tribunal to bring to responsibility the higher political leadership of the Russian Federation. Then we can say that we, as a legal community in Ukraine and international legal community, then we will be able to ensure this justice so that never again, not any time in the future, no generation should fall victims or survivors to the war crimes, including sexual violence related to conflict. So we have a lot of challenges. And also my colleague mentioned the question of reparations. Well, we are talking not only about judicial reparations. We need to create an administrative procedure in Ukraine. We need to create a national mechanism of paying reparation in Ukraine to the survivors of the CRSV. So we need to understand what funds will be used. We need to create a special fund and a special commission which will be responsible, which will be managing the payment of reparation. This is a question not only to Ukraine, but to the international community and to other countries who can freeze some of the assets and confiscate some of the assets, because so that the survivors of sexual violence in Ukraine can get the relevant reparation and redressal for the harm that they experienced in Ukraine. So the challenges for us look very global, but as our common experience has shown of our common work in the legal community, we make small step every day, and that's how we can achieve big results. So we are encouraging you to think together how we can cooperate in order to ensure justice, not only in Ukraine, but also in the entire world, and bring the perpetrators to responsibility. I would like to add a few words, if possible. I fully agree to the words of Khrystyna. I would like to pay attention to three things. There are people who are still located on the occupied territories. There are people who have experienced the occupation and they need help. And there is a conflict, there is a war, which is still going on in Ukraine. I'm sorry for my light. If, as Khrystyna mentioned, if in Ukraine we can work on the national framework and we can continue this work, but the question of responsibility will be very difficult to resolve without the help of the international community if we do it alone. I saw a question in the chat. So how you and lawyers can get engaged. I think that it's important for everybody to participate in different institutions, in different countries. We have to promote this idea of creating the special tribunal and a question of considering these cases in the International Criminal Court. This is also very important today.
Well, thank you so much to both of you, and thank you, Kateryna, for starting to look at the questions in the chat, because we want to leave some space for the audience to ask questions. So that was the first one, and how can we help, and how can we show solidarity, and how, as lawyers, as human beings around the world, can help support. So let me maybe wrap this up as far as our dialogue before the questions is concerned, and getting to the questions by this. What do you think of the response of the international community to date? For us lawyers, we've seen that the magnitude of the legal response has been quite spectacular. Some are talking about responding to warfare with lawfare. A lot of governments, including our governments here in Canada and in Quebec, have lended support to legal initiatives. So what's your take on the support of the international community? Is it taking into account sufficiently the needs of civil society organizations? So there are the institutions, but civil society organizations. And do you have any recommendation to the people listening to you today as you started? Kateryna, you're looking at one of the questions is, what can we do? So we'd like to hear about these questions.
Я тут, можливо, теж трішки продовжу.
Maybe I will continue a bit about this. It is important, and we are grateful to our international partners who cooperate with our government and with us as a civil society organization. And when they plan cooperation, they are asking us about our challenges and about our needs. Because indeed, the civil society organizations that work in Ukraine, they know about the current needs in Ukraine in terms of humanitarian help or legal aid, or in the area of assisting survivors from different crimes, including CRSV. But we are lawyers, we are a legal community, and we are going to talk about how our voices as lawyers, how our voices can be important. Voices of every one of us who are present today, when we are talking about investigating war crimes or crimes against humanity, genocide or aggression. Our important role is to see what is happening in Ukraine, to monitor the situation, to communicate with the legal organizations who are documenting the crimes of CRSV. And we are telling to our communities, we can tell to your communities about what is happening in Ukraine. You can become our voices. So, because it is very important to be on the same page, to have the same understanding of what is happening. Today, it is important to speak about the necessity to create, as I have already mentioned, to create the special tribunal to investigate the aggression crime in Ukraine. This is a very important point. And as I see, and probably you know, that these discussions are going on the international level. I hope that in the nearest time, we will be able to do this, and it's important to communicate this. Also, expert support, expert help, among other things, in investigating and in providing help to the survivors of sexual violence. It is very important, because if we have among us the experts who work in the area of war crimes or crimes against humanity or genocide crimes, we will be happy to engage you to we will be happy to have you to cooperate with us. So the Lawyers Without Borders have been working with us for the entire year in this regard, and this is very valuable for us. Our colleagues in Ukraine, our legal community needs to share this experience. For among other things, from those experts who used to help in other countries, in other conflicts. So sharing this experience is very important. Also, another point is support of our survivors, our people who live in our cities. We have a lot of internally displaced people. We have a lot of people who were forced to flee from war, from Ukraine. Right now, they live in different parts of the world, including Canada. So if you have a Ukrainian community in your towns or cities, please communicate with them, support them, give them our contacts. If they need legal help here in Ukraine, we can work in a distant mode. And this communication and this cooperation in this regard is important. So these are the main things that I wanted to mention. Another thing that I would like to add is that indeed we have some things that people abroad have already encountered abroad and in Ukraine. In the context of sexual violence related to conflict, we are actively exploring international experience. We cooperate with civil society organizations that can share their experience with us to help us to improve not only our knowledge, but this will help us to understand whether it would be relevant for Ukraine, whether it's suitable for our conflict context, not only about CRSV, but also in the questions of gender-based violence. Half a year ago, we have ratified the Istanbul Convention, and right now we are developing a lot of things in order to implement the things that we didn't have time to do before the ratification, because we have been working actively since 2016 on those issues. We are actively studying the international experience of how other countries were doing it. And we are very grateful to our partners, civil society organizations from abroad, who are sharing their experience with us, who are ready to help us get involved in the Ukrainian context. Because in order to understand the Ukrainian situation, to understand what we have to deal with, in order to understand our agenda, it is very important to understand the Ukrainian context. So, if anybody is interested in what we are working with, in what we are fighting with today, I encourage you to talk to Ukrainians actively, to ask Ukrainians questions. Please develop your network of contacts in Ukraine, and this will help you to better understand the reality in Ukraine and our situation. If I may, I would like to add a few words, because the girls have mentioned some things. In fact, besides the conflict-related sexual violence, we continue to work in other areas as well. For more than 3 years, we have been focusing on research of domestic violence in Ukraine. And we have been researching how the war impacted the number of requests on the domestic violence. We have been initiating a number of legislative changes, and we still continue this work. As for the Istanbul Convention, we still continue to develop the amendments to the legislation. We are trying to communicate with different representatives in the government. So, therefore, I'm inviting you to visit our website. We don't always have possibility to translate everything into English because we have a lot of workload and we have a lot of demands, but we will be trying to inform the international community as well.
Well, thank you to the three of you, and thank you, Kateryna, for mentioning your excellent website as one source of information and to engage with you. I'm looking here, there is a large number of questions. So we have a challenge, Khrystyna, Marta, and Kateryna. We have 10 minutes left. What I propose to do is to have maybe 3 or 4 questions in a round to the three of you, because very, very interesting questions, some very, very concrete about the work you are doing, and some more about the international law context in Ukraine. So there is a question about the overwhelming number of human rights violations and of crimes being committed that you have to deal with. What is the biggest challenge you are facing in addressing so many human rights violations and so many crimes as far as domestic prosecution of these crimes are concerned? Another related question is there's interest about your helpline that you mentioned before. So we have a question about how it is really operating concretely. How do the victims and the survivors can engage with the hotline? Which tools you are using to bring support to the victims and survivors that are going through the hotline? Another question, a third one, which is they're all related in a way, is how can you operate? You told us that you can work because you're based in Lviv, which is in a part of the country which is maybe less affected by the conflict. So what about what is happening in the occupied territory? We understand that the courts and the institutions are not operating there. So how do you deal with the victims and survivors in the occupied territory at the present point? The last one, a fourth one, if we may try in the few minutes that are left, is about which inspiration at the international level are you looking at in terms of reparations? You have, the three of you have talked about the importance of getting to reparations. So if there's been a crime, there's been an impact on a person, on a community, we will need reparations at some point. So what are your inspirations? What experiences are you looking at? So big challenge to the three of you, but as you can see, a lot of interest. I leave the floor to the three of you for the next 7 minutes.
Дякую, Паскаль.
Thank you, Pascal. I will try to use 7 minutes. It would be difficult, of course. So these questions are related, of course. The first thing that I would like to say is that we don't have access to the occupied territories, and we are not able to provide help to those people who are currently located on the temporarily occupied territories. This is true, and this is a fact. People located on the occupied territories, if they have means of communication, they can give us a telephone call, they can send us messages, but it may be dangerous for them. So people are not using this opportunity. So it's impossible to provide any help for people there. But in spite of the fact that we are located in the city of Lviv, we have representative office, we have lawyers working in different regions of Ukraine. So if a person refers to us, if a survivor of sexual violence refers to us on any territory controlled by Ukraine, they can get help in any region, in any district. They can leave a request on our platform. They can describe a situation, and we can provide a written response, or we can call this person on the phone. Also, people can use any apps to send us. People can use messengers to ask us for help, or they can call us on our telephone numbers, and our helpline coordinators will be able to respond. If a person tells that they have experienced sexual violence and they need a lawyer's support, we specify the location of this person, and then we look for a lawyer in the relevant location, in the relevant district, to continue work with this person. Our help is free, and our organization is paying the lawyers for the work that they provide to the survivors. from the sexual violence. So this is how our work is organized right now. Also, we have cases when survivors of sexual violence committed by the Russian army personnel, if they managed to leave the occupied territories or if they went abroad, we can provide a distant help. So if a person calls us on the phone, according to our legislation, a lawyer can conduct an oral agreement with such a survivor and represent their interests if they need it. Lawyers can represent their interests here in Ukraine. Even if a survivor is located abroad, they can get all the necessary legal help provided by our colleagues here in Ukraine. This is how we organize our work. As for the question of reparations that you have mentioned, this issue is very difficult. We were studying experience of different countries. We were studying the practice of the ICC and special tribunals for Rwanda, Yugoslavia. We have been studying the experience of Colombia for paying reparations. But I have to say that these are very different armed conflicts. For example, if we take Colombia, in spite of the fact that people say that this country has the best mechanism for reparation, but they used to have an internal conflict, domestic conflict. This was not an international conflict. So these mechanisms have to use different approaches. Taking this into account, our organization, together with the Global Survivors Fund organization, next month, we are going to organize for our government and for our legal organizations, we are going to organize a visit to Geneva, where they are going to study experience of different countries. We are doing this journey together with the Global Survivors Fund, and on the basis of the results of this journey, we are going to develop a mechanism for reparations in Ukraine. So these are our future steps. So if I have missed something, my colleagues will be able to add. The only question that I saw in the chat to add to this was whether we are documenting the war crimes. We are not documenting them. We have abandoned this idea from the very beginning. We are not collecting the data to transmit them, but we are trying to provide legal aid. So that people who refer to us, we help them to get prepared to go to the law enforcement agencies, and so that these cases could be investigated according to the legislation.
Well, thank you for this precision, because it is true that this is a survivor-centered approach, I think, that we are working on, which is distinct from documenting the crimes. Many other questions have been added to the chat, but I think we can all say that this is not the end of the dialogue. It is one further step in a dialogue that will continue, that will further continue. We hope that thanks to the support of the people around this discussion, many have expressed their interest to help. So please reach out to JurFem, reach out to Lawyers Without Borders. We thank you so much. Once again, the three of you, we have to wrap up this session because the time has come. I see that we would have had materials for at least another hour, but our together continues. Rest assured, all of you listening, participating in this webinar, that Lawyers Without Borders and JurFem are continuing on the way of their partnership. We would like to thank you so much, the three of you, for your time. We know this is a difficult context. You are in the middle of the evening in Ukraine, so thank you so much. It's been absolutely thrilling to hear the three of you. Thank you once again to the government of Quebec, that has rendered this project, this seminar, and this collaboration possible. Thank you so much to Minister Biron, to Mr. Bachan, to Mrs. Gervais, and Mrs. Pouliot for your presence today. Much appreciated. Once again, keep looking at our respective websites. We'll be announcing other activities. We'll be maybe providing in another means other answers to many of your questions and suggestions for further commitment to all of you. So thank you once again. Please stay safe, and we really much looking forward to our next sessions together. Thank you so much.